The sting of my mother's palm across my face was louder than the thunder rolling over the $9.7 million estate outside. It wasn't just the pain, it was the sheer cold entitlement behind the strike. "Sign the deed, Bridget," my sister Aurora hissed, sliding a gold-plated pen across the mahogany table. "You were always the help. You don't deserve the crown." I looked at the lawyer, Mr. Covington, who had been silent for an hour. He leaned in, his voice a low vibration that seemed to freeze the air. "Do you know who actually—" He didn't finish the sentence, but the room fell into a silence so heavy it felt like we were underwater. In that silence, I realized that for 24 years, I had been the only person in this room living the truth. To understand the slap, you have to understand the 20 years of bruises that preceded it. I grew up in the Old Oak Manor, a sprawling Gothic masterpiece of marble and secrets. To the world, we were the Blackwells, pillars of industry, heirs to a shipping empire. But inside those walls, I was the quiet one. My sister Aurora was the sun. She was beautiful, vibrant, and cruel. My mother Gwendolyn worshipped her. They spent their days in Paris, their evenings at galas, and their nights spending the money my father, Winston, worked himself to death to provide. And then there was me. I was the one who stayed behind when my father's mind began to slip into the fog of dementia. I was the one who changed his linens, read him the Wall Street Journal when he could no longer see, and held his hand while he wept for a life he couldn't remember. For 3 years, while Aurora and Mother were finding themselves in the Mediterranean, I was a 22-year-old nurse, accountant, and punching bag. My mother would call once a month, not to ask about Dad's health, but to complain that her wire transfer was 24 hours late. When my father finally passed 3 weeks ago, the tears weren't even dry on my face before they arrived. They didn't come to mourn, they came to harvest. They walked into the manor, complained about the smell of sickness, and immediately began tagging the furniture with post-it notes for auction. The estate, valued at $9.7 million, including the offshore accounts and the land, was the ultimate prize. But there was a problem, a legal snag. My father had updated the deed 6 months before his death, and for some reason, the state required my signature for any transfer of title. That brings us to tonight, the family gathering, the vulture's picnic, as I called it in my head. We sat in the grand library, surrounded by thousands of books my mother never read. The air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the underlying rot of greed. Aurora sat across from me, wearing a black silk dress that cost more than my entire college tuition. She looked bored, tapping her manicured nails on the table. "Look, Bridget," Aurora said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "We all know you're not built for this. You're simple. You like your gardens and your quiet little life. Running an estate of this magnitude requires a certain sophistication. Just sign the deed over to me. I'll give you a monthly stipend. You'll never have to work again." "A stipend?" I asked, my voice raspy. "I've been running this house for 3 years. I managed Dad's medications, the staff payroll, and the tax audits, while you were in Mykonos." Gwendolyn, my mother, slammed her wine glass down. "Don't you dare use that tone with your sister. You were a caretaker, Bridget, a glorified maid. Your father was senile when he gave you any authority. We are the face of this family. You are just the shadow. Now sign the paper." "No," I said. The word was small, but it hit the room like a grenade. "What did you say?" Gwendolyn's eyes narrowed into slits. I said, "No, I'm not signing the deed over to Aurora. This house was Dad's heart. You want to sell it to developers to build a golf course? I won't let you." That was when it happened. My mother stood up with a speed I didn't know she possessed and cracked her hand across my cheek. The force spun my head to the side. The room gasped, but no one moved to help. "You have no other choice," Gwendolyn hissed, leaning over me, her breath smelling of gin. "Do as you were told, or I will have you removed from this house by the police tonight. You are a guest here by my grace alone." I looked up, my cheek burning, my eyes stinging with tears I refused to let fall. I looked at Mr. Covington, the family's longtime attorney. He was a man of integrity, a man who had seen my father's true final days. He looked at Gwendolyn, then at Aurora, and then finally at me. He cleared his throat, a sound like dry leaves. He leaned forward and whispered the words that changed everything. "Do you know who actually earned the initial capital for this entire estate? Gwendolyn." The room went deathly silent. My mother froze. Her face, previously flushed with rage, turned a ghostly translucent white. "What are you talking about, Covington?" Aurora snapped, though her voice wavered. "Our grandfather started the firm. It's family money." Mr. Covington pulled a dusty yellow document from his briefcase. "Actually, no. Your grandfather's firm went bankrupt in 1994. The $9.7 million you see today, the house, the accounts, the legacy, was built on a private trust established by Winston's first wife, Bridget's biological mother." I felt the world tilt. My biological mother? I had been told she was a penniless orphan who died in childbirth. "The trust had a clause," Covington continued, his voice gaining strength. "It stated that the wealth could only be inherited by her direct bloodline. Gwendolyn, you were never an owner. You were a beneficiary of Winston's goodwill. But the deed isn't yours to take, and it isn't Bridget's to sign over. The deed has already been hers since the day she turned 21. She just had to wait for Winston to pass to activate the full title." He looked at me with a sad, knowing smile. "Bridget, you don't need to sign anything. You already own every brick, every blade of grass, and every cent in their bank accounts." The silence was absolute. I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel, a rhythmic, mocking sound. Aurora was the first to break. "That's a lie. This is a setup. She's paying you off." She lunged for the papers in Mr. Covington's hand, but he pulled them back with practiced ease. "It's all here, Aurora," he said coldly. "Public record. Winston kept it quiet to protect Bridget from exactly this." I stood up. My legs felt like lead, but my heart was racing. I looked at my mother, the woman who had let me believe I was a charity case in my own home, the woman who had just slapped me for her own greed. "Is it true?" I asked. Gwendolyn didn't look at me. She looked at the floor. "Your mother was a fool. She thought love mattered more than legacy." "And you thought greed mattered more than daughter," I replied. The power shift in the room was physical. I could feel it. The air didn't belong to them anymore. It belonged to me. I walked over to the sideboard and poured myself a glass of the water they hadn't offered me all night. "So," I said, turning back to them, "let's talk about the future." "Bridget, honey," Gwendolyn said, her voice suddenly trembling with a sickeningly false maternal warmth. "The grief, the pressure, the slap," she pleaded. "A mistake, a terrible mistake." I looked at Aurora. She was staring at me with a mixture of terror and loathing. She knew what was coming. She knew because if the roles were reversed, she would have crushed me. "Mr. Covington," I said, not taking my eyes off my sister, "if I am the sole owner of this estate and the primary trustee of the accounts, what does that mean for the current residents?" "It means," Covington said, suppressed satisfaction in his voice, "that they are guests, and as the owner, you have the right to terminate their residency and their access to all trust-funded assets, including the credit cards, the vehicles, and the allowances." "You wouldn't," Aurora breathed. "You're too weak. You're the quiet one, remember?"
The quiet ones are the ones who listen, Aurora, I said, and I've been listening to you belittle me for 20 years. I've been listening to you plot how to kick me out of the only home I've ever known, while I was holding our father's hand as he died. I've listened enough. I didn't scream. I didn't throw them out into the rain that night. That would have been too quick, too merciful. No, I wanted them to feel the slow realization of their new reality. You have 24 hours, I said calmly. 24 for what? Gwendolyn asked, her voice cracking.
To pack your personal belongings, clothes, jewelry, the things you actually own. The furniture stays. The cars, which are registered to the estate, stay. The credit cards are being frozen as of now. I glanced at my watch. Bridget, you can't be serious, Aurora shrieked. Where are we supposed to go? You have that apartment in the city, don't you, Aurora? The one you bought with the emergency funds you embezzled from Dad last year? Oh, don't look so surprised. I've been doing the accounting, remember? I saw the trail. I turned to my mother. And you, Mother, you can go with her. I'm sure you'll enjoy the sophistication of a 2-bedroom condo after living in a 30-room manor. You're a monster, Gwendolyn said, the mask finally dropping. No, I said, walking toward the door. I'm the owner, and the help is finished for the night. The next day was the most peaceful day of my life. I sat on the veranda and watched as movers carried out their designer luggage. Aurora cried, Gwendolyn cursed. They tried to call their friends, the high society of the city, only to find that word travels fast. Mr. Covington had ensured the legal community knew the Blackwell fortune had shifted hands. No one wanted to be on the wrong side of the new $9.7 million heiress.